Daniel froze for a second. The look in his eyes told her everything. Emma, he began carefully. How much do you know? Enough, she said. I saw you. At the cafe. With her. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There was no anger in his face, just quiet sadness. Her name is Claire, he said softly. She's someone I met at work a few months ago. We started talking. At first, it was just friendship. I didn't plan for this, Emma. I never planned to feel something again. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. How could you? What about Mom? Don't you still love her? Daniel looked at her with deep pain. I'll always love your mother, he said firmly. But Emma? Love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It changes. It leaves an emptiness. For years, I tried to live only with memories. But memories don't hold your hand. They don't ask if you're okay. They don't make you laugh when the world feels empty. Emma looked away, her throat tight. So you just moved on? No, he whispered. I tried to survive. Those words hit her harder than she expected. For years, she had seen him as strong as the man who never broke. But now she saw something else, a lonely man trying to find light after living too long in the dark. Still, she couldn't forgive him that easily. Not yet. Does she know about me? Emma asked quietly. Yes, Daniel said. She knows everything. About your mother, about us. She doesn't want to replace anyone. She just wants to be a part of my life. Emma turned her face away, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. You should have told me, she said. I had to find out like this. It feels like you've been lying to me. Daniel took a step closer, but she pulled back. I didn't want to hurt you, he said. I thought if I kept it private a little longer, maybe I could figure out if it was real. She wiped her tears. And is it? He paused, then nodded slowly. Yes, it is. She makes me feel like I can breathe again. Emma wanted to hate that answer, but deep inside, she couldn't, because she had seen it with her own eyes. The way he laughed, the way his shoulders relaxed, the way the sadness lifted from his face. She remembered nights when he sat in silence, staring at her mother's photo. And now, for the first time, he looked alive. Still, she felt betrayed. I just need time, she said finally. I understand, Daniel replied softly. Take all the time you need. The next few days were heavy. The house felt colder, not because of anger, but because of distance. Emma didn't speak much. She replayed every memory in her head, their family dinners. Her father's jokes, the way her mother smiled at him across the table. It all felt fragile now, like she was watching someone else's story. But one night, when she couldn't sleep, Emma walked downstairs and saw her father sitting in the living room, looking at a framed photo of her mother. His expression wasn't guilt or shame, it was love. Deep, enduring love. He whispered softly to the picture, I hope you'd understand. Emma stood in the doorway, tears filling her eyes again. She realized he wasn't replacing her mother. He was trying to live with the pain of losing her. Maybe loving someone new wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Still, her heart ached. It was hard to see the man she'd always known as unshakable be so human, so vulnerable. But maybe that was what made him real, that the next morning, when Daniel offered to drive her to work, she hesitated but agreed. The car ride was quiet, the air filled with unspoken words. As they stopped at a red light, Daniel said softly, You know, I never stopped loving your mom. But I think she'd want me to smile again. And I think she'd want you to understand that love doesn't end, grows in different ways. Emma stared out the window, watching the sun break through the clouds. She didn't answer, but she nodded slightly. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wasn't ready. When he dropped her off, he said, I'm still your dad, Emma. That will never change. She looked at him, her voice small but sincere. I know. As he drove away, Emma stood on the sidewalk for a long time, feeling the wind brush her face. Her heart was torn between pain and understanding, but for the first time, she saw the truth not as betrayal but as something fragile, human and deeply real, she whispered to herself. Maybe this is what healing looks like. Messy, confusing, but still love. And though she didn't know it yet, That realization would be the first step toward mending what had been quietly breaking between them. The silence between Emma and her father lasted 4 days. The house that once felt warm now echoed with distance. They still shared meals, but neither of them said much. Daniel tried to act normal, asking about her work, smiling politely, but Emma's answers were short. The truth about Claire hung between them like an invisible wall, one neither of them knew how to cross at night. Emma often lay awake replaying everything in her mind: the cafe, the look in his eyes, his confession. It wasn't the affair that haunted her. It was how lost she felt. Her father had always been her compass, her guide, her steady ground. But now, she didn't know who he was anymore. She wanted to be angry, but part of her heart couldn't ignore the pain he'd lived with since her mother's death. One evening, a storm rolled through Portland. Rain drummed against the windows as thunder echoed far away. Emma was in her room pretending to read when she heard a soft knock at the door. She didn't answer right away. Then Daniel's quiet voice came through. "Emma, can we talk?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Yeah." "Come in." Daniel stepped inside. He looked tired, not just from the day, but from the weight of everything unsaid. He sat on the edge of her desk chair while she stayed on her bed, hugging her knees. The air between them felt thick. "I know things have been hard since you found out," he began gently, "and I know I hurt you by keeping it from you." Emma didn't look at him. "You didn't just hurt me, Dad. You broke something I believed in. I thought you'd never move on like that." Daniel took a slow breath. "I didn't plan for this to happen. I wasn't looking for someone. But grief does strange things. For years, I woke up every morning missing your mother so much that I couldn't even breathe. And then one day I met Claire, and she didn't try to fix me. She just listened. It started with that." His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. "I spent so long pretending I was fine. I had to be strong for you. But when I was alone, I wasn't strong at all. I was empty. Claire reminded me that I was still alive, Emma. That I could still laugh, still care, still hope. It doesn't mean I stopped loving your mother." Emma finally looked up. His eyes were wet, sincere. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why hide it?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," he said softly. "I knew you'd see it as betrayal. I was afraid you'd hate me for it." Emma's throat tightened. "I don't hate you," she said quietly. "I just don't understand how love can change like that." Daniel nodded slowly. "Love doesn't always stay the same shape. Your mother and I had a love built on years of laughter, trust, and pain we survived together. That love still exists. But it doesn't mean I have to live forever in grief. She wouldn't want that. Claire isn't replacing Hirsch. She's just helping me find the strength to live again." Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I keep thinking about Mom. What she'd say if she saw this." Daniel smiled sadly. "She'd probably scold me for waiting so long. She always told me I was too serious about everything. She'd want me to smile more. And she'd want you to stop worrying about protecting me all the time." That last part hit her hard. She'd been so focused on guarding his heart that she'd forgotten he was a person with his own wounds. For the first time, she saw him not just as her father, but as a man trying to heal. Still, she couldn't ignore her own pain. "You know what hurt the most?" she said, her voice trembling. "Hearing you say those words to someone else. You used to talk to Mom like that. Hearing it again, it felt like losing her all over." Daniel lowered his head, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I can't imagine how that must have felt. I wish I could take that pain from you." There was a long silence. Only the sound of rain filled the room. Then Emma whispered, "Do you love her?" He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but soft. "I do. But it's different. It's not the same kind of love I had for your mother. It's gentler, quieter. It's about learning to be alive again, not replacing what was lost." Emma nodded slowly. It still hurt, but there was something in his honesty that calmed her. For years, she had seen him as this unshakable man who could survive anything. But now she realized that even strong people needed someone to remind them how to live again. She looked up at him. "I just don't want to lose you, Dad. Not to grief, not to someone else. I just want us to still be okay." Daniel's expression softened. He reached out, hesitant at first, then gently placed his hand over hers. "You'll never lose me, sweetheart. You are my heart. Everything I've done, every mistake, every choice, it's always been with you in mind. I just needed something to bring me back to life so I could be the father you deserve again." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "You've always been a good father," she said quietly, "even when I didn't understand you." They sat there for a long moment, the air heavy but warm. For the first time since everything began, Emma felt something inside her ease. The anger didn't vanish completely, but it softened into something else, understanding. Emma had always seen her father, Daniel, as her anchor. He was the kind of man who kept everything together even when life tried to break him apart. After her mother, Lily, passed away, Daniel didn't fall apart like people expected. He smiled through pain, made breakfast every morning, and reminded Emma to keep chasing her dreams. Their small house in Portland was quiet, sometimes too quiet, but it still felt safe. That safety was everything Emma had left. But lately, things were different. Daniel came home late, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened as if he didn't care anymore. He used to talk to Emma about everything, her classes, her friends, her hopes, but now silence filled their evenings. He smiled, yes, but it wasn't the same kind of smile. It was lighter, distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. Emma told herself he was tired. After all, grief never really left, did it? It just hid in the corners of their lives. Then one evening, the peace of their home cracked open. Rain fell softly against the windows, and Emma was cooking dinner, just pasta, something simple her dad loved. She heard him in his study, his voice low, steady. He was on the phone. That wasn't unusual, but something about his tone made her stop stirring the sauce. It wasn't the voice of a man talking to a coworker. It was softer, warmer. She walked closer to the study door, just a few steps, and paused. The door was slightly open, the warm light spilling into the hallway. Daniel sat by the window, holding his phone with both hands, staring into the distance as if he were speaking to a memory. His voice was gentle. "I think about you all the time," he said quietly. Emma froze. The words didn't make sense. Her father, the man who still wore his wedding ring, the man who never missed visiting her mother's grave every Sunday, had just said something she couldn't unhear. Her heartbeat quickened. She wanted to believe she misheard. Maybe he was talking about a friend. Maybe it was a figure of speech. But deep down, something inside her shifted. The warmth in his tone was unmistakably affection, tenderness. Longing, she took one silent step back, then another. Her throat felt tight, her hands shaking slightly. She didn't want to confront him, not yet. She just needed to breathe. In the kitchen, she turned off the stove, leaned against the counter, and tried to steady herself. Her mind raced through memories, her mother's laughter, her father's promises, the long nights they spent missing her together. Had he already forgotten? Had the years of love and loss meant nothing now? Dinner went untouched that night. When Daniel came out of his study, his eyes looked tired, but not from work. He noticed the food on the counter and smiled faintly. "You didn't eat?" he asked. Emma forced a smile. "I wasn't hungry." He nodded slowly, studying her face for a moment, but didn't press further. "Long day," he murmured and walked upstairs. As she watched him disappear, Emma felt something inside her crumble. The house suddenly felt foreign. Every picture frame, every shadow seemed to whisper a question she didn't want answered. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the rain outside became her only comfort. She thought of how her father had carried their pain for years, how he had been both mother and father to her. But what if he had been carrying something else? True loneliness, guilt, or even desire to feel alive again? Her thoughts spiraled. She remembered his new cologne, the one he started wearing a few months ago. He said a coworker had given it to him. She remembered the text tone she'd heard once late at night and how he had quickly turned his phone face down. Back then, she thought nothing of it. Now, every small detail felt like a clue she had missed. But Emma wasn't angry yet. Not really. She was confused, hurt, and afraid. The man who had taught her about love, loyalty, and honesty was hiding something big. Something that could change everything between them. The next morning, Daniel acted normal to normal. He made coffee, asked about her classes, and kissed her forehead before heading out the door. It was their usual routine, but now it felt rehearsed. She watched him leave, trying to find guilt or regret in his eyes. But there was none. Only calmness. That made it worse. The day dragged on. Emma went to her part-time job at the bookstore but couldn't focus. Every customer's voice blurred into the same question, repeating in her mind, who was he talking to? By the time she got home, she decided she had to know. Not because she wanted to accuse him, but because the truth, no matter how painful, was better than pretending. That night, she waited until he went to bed. She sat on the couch, staring at his phone on the coffee table. The screen lit up once with a soft vibration. Her stomach dropped. She didn't mean to look, but her eyes caught the name flashing across the screen, Claire. Her chest tightened. The message preview showed only a few words. I miss you already. Emma turned away quickly, tears stinging her eyes. That was enough. She didn't need to read more. She didn't need to invade his privacy to understand what was happening. The truth was right there, glowing faintly in the dark. She went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed, her heart heavy with disappointment. She wanted to scream, to ask him why. But she couldn't, not yet, because part of her still loved him too much to break his heart the way he had unknowingly broken hers. As she stared out the window, she realized something painful but real. Her father wasn't perfect. He was human. Maybe that was the hardest part to accept. The man she had trusted more than anyone had found comfort in someone else. And yet, even as anger and sadness tangled inside her, there was a strange softness beneath it all. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe this was how grief looked after years of silence. But no matter the reason, Emma knew one thing: their relationship would never be the same again. The next morning, she woke up early and made breakfast, just like always. Daniel came downstairs, cheerful, humming a tune she hadn't heard in years. He looked happy, lighter somehow. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. Emma looked at him carefully, studying the lines on his face. There was warmth there, yes, but also distance. He was changing, and she didn't know if she could follow him into that new part of his life. "Morning, Dad," she replied softly. Her voice trembled, but she smiled anyway. He smiled back, unaware of what she knew, unaware that their fragile world had shifted forever. As he left for work, Emma stood by the window watching him drive away. The truth now lived quietly between them, unspoken but alive, like a storm waiting at the edge of a clear sky. She whispered to herself, "Something's changed, and I can't pretend I didn't see it." That was the moment everything began to unravel, the quiet before the storm that would soon redefine what love, trust, and forgiveness really meant between a father and daughter. Emma couldn't stop thinking about that message. The name Claire repeated in her mind like an echo she couldn't silence. She wanted to ask her father who this woman was, but fear held her back. What if he lied? What if he told her the truth? Both answers terrified her. Days passed in uneasy silence. Daniel carried on with his usual calmness, but his behavior confirmed her suspicions. He dressed better, smiled more, and checked his phone with quiet anticipation. The emptiness that had once lived in his eyes was gone, replaced by something Emma couldn't name. Something alive. By the end of the week, her curiosity became unbearable. One Saturday morning, Daniel said he was going out for errands. He grabbed his coat, whistled softly, and left the house. Emma waited a few minutes, then took her keys. She didn't want to spy, but she needed answers. She followed his car from a distance, her heart racing the whole way. Every turn he took felt like a step closer to the truth. After 20 minutes, he parked by a small cafe near the Lake of Cozy, a quiet place where people went to escape the city noise. Emma parked across the street and watched. Her hands trembled as she saw him step out of the car and glance around, almost nervous. Then a woman appeared. She was elegant but simple shoulder-length brown hair, a light scarf, and kind eyes that carried warmth. She smiled when she saw Daniel, and he smiled back. The kind of smile Emma hadn't seen in years. They walked inside together, sat at a corner table, and began to talk. At first, Emma felt angry, betrayed even. But as she watched, her anger slowly changed to confusion. Daniel wasn't behaving like someone doing something wrong. He looked happy. At peace, his laughter filled the cafe through the glass, gentle and real. The woman Claire listened to him with care, nodding, touching his hand briefly as they spoke. Emma's heart ached. It wasn't the sight of them together that hurt most, it was seeing her father like that, open and free. For so long he had lived in quiet pain. But here he was, looking alive again. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. After about an hour, Daniel and Claire walked to the lake, stopping by the water. Emma stayed in the car, watching the reflection of sunlight shimmer on the waves around them. Daniel took Claire's hand, holding it gently as they talked. When she leaned her head against his shoulder, Emma felt her chest tighten. It was too real now to ignore. When Daniel dropped Claire off and returned home that evening, Emma was waiting in the living room. She couldn't hide it anymore. "Who is she?" Her voice was calm but trembling. The weeks that followed were quiet but calmer. Something in the house had shifted, less tension, more air to breathe. Emma and her father didn't talk much about Claire again, but the silence between them no longer felt cold. It felt like space for healing, space for time to do its slow work. One Saturday morning, Daniel came into the kitchen with a hesitant smile. "Emma," he said softly, "I'm meeting Claire for lunch today. And she asked if you'd like to come." Emma froze. She hadn't expected the invitation so soon. Her heart jumped between nerves and curiosity. For a moment, she wanted to say no, to keep the safe distance she'd built. But then she saw her father's eyes, hopeful but nervous. The same eyes that once looked so broken after her mother's passing. And suddenly, she didn't want to be the reason that light disappeared again. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll come." Daniel's smile widened just a little. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." Later that afternoon, they drove to a quiet little restaurant by the lake. It was the same place Emma had seen them together weeks ago. Her chest tightened at the memory, but she took a deep breath. This time was different. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was walking into the truth with her eyes open. Claire was already there, sitting by a window. When Emma saw her up close, she was struck by how gentle she looked. There was no pretension, no effort to impress, just a calm kindness in her expression. She stood when they arrived, smiling warmly. "Emma," she said softly, "it's so good to finally meet you." "Hi," Emma replied, trying to smile back. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, but Claire didn't seem to mind. The three of them sat down. For a few moments, conversation stumbled, small talk about the weather, work, and the city. But soon the awkwardness began to fade. Claire had a way of making things easy. She asked Emma about her studies, her favorite books, her plans for the future. She listened with real attention, not forcing closeness but gently creating it. As they talked, Emma noticed something surprising. Claire never spoke about her relationship with Daniel in front of her. She didn't touch his hand or show affection. She kept the moment focused on getting to know Emma. It wasn't what Emma expected, but it made her feel safe. Halfway through lunch, Daniel excused himself to take a phone call, leaving the two women alone. The silence that followed could have been uncomfortable, but it wasn't. Claire smiled faintly. "You know," she said, "your dad talks about you all the time. He's so proud of you, Emma." Emma blinked. He does." Claire nodded. "Always. He told me how strong you've been, how you kept him going after your mom passed. He said you were the reason he didn't fall apart." Hearing that made Emma's throat tighten. For the first time, she felt something other than anger or confusion. She felt seen. She realized Claire wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was just someone who cared for her father and somehow cared for Emma too. "I thought I'd hate you," Emma admitted quietly. Claire smiled gently. "I would have understood if you did. Losing someone you love never stops hurting. I just hope one day you'll see that I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because your dad deserves to smile again. I want to help him do that." There was sincerity in her voice that disarmed Emma completely. She could feel the honesty in every word. No lies, no competition, just compassion. Daniel came back, and the rest of the lunch went easier. There was laughter, small stories, even a few shared smiles. When they left, Emma surprised herself by saying, "It was nice meeting you, Claire." Claire's eyes softened. "It was nice meeting you too, Emma." That evening, when they got home, Daniel turned to her at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming. I know that wasn't easy." Emma smiled faintly. "She's not what I expected." He laughed softly. "She's been that way since the day I met her away, surprising me." For the first time, Emma didn't feel hurt hearing him say that. She felt peace. Days turned into weeks, and slowly things began to change for the better. Emma still missed her mother, but the pain wasn't as sharp. She found herself remembering the good times without feeling the same hollow ache. Daniel seemed lighter too. He still visited her mother's grave every Sunday. But now he came home with a quiet smile instead of red eyes. Sometimes Claire joined them for dinner, bringing homemade apple pie, the same dessert Emma's mom used to bake. At first, that small detail stung. But one night when Claire served it, she said softly, "Your dad told me this was your mom's favorite recipe. I hope that's okay." Emma nodded. "It is." And somehow it really was. As months passed, the tension that once filled their home disappeared. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like winter giving way to spring. There were still hard days, moments when grief returned like an old shadow, but now, love and forgiveness stood beside it. One evening, Emma found her father sitting by the fireplace with Claire, laughing at something simple and sweet. For a long time, she just watched them from the hallway. There was warmth in that scene, not the kind that replaced what was lost, but the kind that built something new around it. When Claire went home, Daniel turned to Emma with that familiar, gentle smile. "You okay, sweetheart?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, I think so." He studied her face for a moment, then said softly, "I never stopped loving your mother, Emma. But love, it doesn't live only in the past. It grows. You helped me find the strength to let it grow again." She swallowed hard. "You deserve to be happy, Dad. I can see she makes you happy," smiled, eyes glistening. "She does. But you're my heart, Emma. You're the reason I made it this far." Tears filled her eyes. She crossed the room and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Mom would be too." He held her close, his voice trembling. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Outside, the night was calm. The rain that once symbolized sadness now sounded peaceful, like music against the windows. Inside, the air was filled with warm thaw, forgiveness, acceptance, and new beginnings. Emma realized that love wasn't about holding on to what was gone, it was about finding the courage to keep loving. Even after heartbreak, her father had found that courage, and now she was finding hers too. As she stood by the window that night, watching her father laugh quietly to himself while texting Claire, Emma smiled. The pain was still there, somewhere deep down, but it was softer now, no longer sharp enough to cut. She whispered to herself, "We're okay now." And for the first time in years, she truly meant it. Their home, once heavy with silence, now carried a new kind of peace built on forgiveness, on understanding, and on the quiet strength of love that refused to fade, no matter how life changed. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one, and that made it beautiful.